It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and listen, I don't know about you guys, but it is, as at the time of recording this, it's cold, but there's something about being outside. It's the crispness and chill in the air that makes you feel good and makes you feel alive almost. And so I was reminded of that not too long ago when I was thumbing through in a warm room looking at some Instagram photos, and my friend Chef Matt Cooper, formerly from Preacher's Son, now from Conifer, was out in the wilderness cooking what just looked like a gourmet meal for a bunch of guys. And I was like, man, I need to have a piece of that in some way, shape, or form. And so I asked Matt about that adventure, and it is. I learned later on that it's a program that's done by a gentleman named Rick Spicer. If you don't know Rick is one of the owners of Pack Rat, which is right over there off of Gregg in Fayetteville, not far from Township. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit about Pack Rat in a minute. But Rick puts on several outdoor programs, and this one is called the Winterlager, and he's going to talk a little bit about that today. But I wanted to have Rick on because he has an interesting story. He is like a couple of other people that we've had on the podcast, somebody that, actually started out as an employee at the company that he works at and then eventually became an owner, which I thought was pretty cool. And if you'll remember, we had the founder of Uncle Sam's Outfitters, not the founder, but the current owner of Uncle Sam's Outfitters on the podcast about a year and a half ago. And we talked about his story of starting out as a student at the University of Arkansas who eventually bought the company. And I think it's such an interesting conversation. And it's actually a really good conversation to have about why sometimes you don't have to start a business. You can buy an existing business, and there's tremendous value and honor and opportunity in that. But I digress. That's not what this particular episode is about, even though it's one of the underlying themes of the story. But without further ado, I want to welcome Rick Spicer here to the Furman Garner Performance Center at KUAF's studios where we're recording this. And Rick, I just want to welcome you to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for letting me be here today.
Good. Well, it's so good to have you. I would love for you just to tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Give us, as I like to say, and I've said it for so long, your superhero origin story.
Oh, that's funny. Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm superhero material, but I am from East Arkansas originally. I grew up early ages in West Memphis, actually. And I, through one reason or another, when I was young, found myself in Northwest Arkansas. My mother and stepfather moved up there to Siloam Springs and tried that for a little bit. And then but the goal all along was to get to Fayetteville because we had some family here already. And it was pretty much as soon as we got here, there wasn't any looking back. I think they were like, okay, this is where we want to be. And so Fayetteville is my home. I've been here since I was probably 10 years old or so, I think. And I went to junior high school and had a brief stint at University of Tennessee, but that was a challenging time as it can be for many folks in school. I was loading semi-trailers at night, trying to go to school at the same time. And I found myself missing my friends a lot, and so I moved back and ultimately graduated from University of Arkansas with a degree in environmental, soil, and water science. However, I was actually already working at the Pack Rat Outdoor Center here in Fayetteville. I started working there when I was 19, and I graduated, and it was funny because this founder of that business, Scott Crook, and his wife Carolyn, he knew I was going to be graduating, and I can remember it to this day when he came in and he said, "What are you going to do after you graduate?" And at the time, all I really cared about was doing outdoor stuff, rock climbing, fishing, backpacking. And I was like, well, I guess at some point I'll look around, but I kind of just want to do outdoor stuff for a while. And he was like, well, I'll give you more money if you'll be a manager for me. And I was like, more money sounds good. So, and kind of the rest is history, honestly. I gradually took on more and more responsibility over the years. And Scott, unfortunately, passed away some years ago now due to Parkinson's complications. But his wife, Carolyn, founder, is still the primary principal of that business. And she's one of the hardest working people I have ever known. She'll be 80 this year.
Wow.
And she is a inspiration and, quite frankly, a machine when it comes to getting things done.
Right.
Yeah, she just has an unbelievable work ethic. And if you ask her about it, she'll tell you that that's what keeps her going, right? Not only is it Pack Rat, Pack Rat, interesting, has always kind of been her hobby. She has a whole other career. She has a PhD in chemistry, and she manages compliance for pathology laboratories. And she
still does.
She still does.
Wow. Okay.
She actually travels extensively to do this. And she'll work. They will work her to death if she allows it because she has such a unique skill set. And a lot of people don't realize like how much she really does in a given day. But she's a remarkable woman.
Wow, yep. That's awesome. I love hearing that. And for the uninitiated, just kind of what type of retail outlet is Pack Rat?
Yeah, so what we call ourselves in kind of the industry lingo is a specialty outdoor store.
Okay.
And basically what that means is that we try to have an emphasis on the customer experience. I'm try very hard not to be in the habit of talking negatively about anyone. But if you go into a larger big box store, I'm not going to name any names, but if you go into one of these types of stores, when was the last time you had kind of a meaningful conversation in a big box store with a customer, with an employee there? What was their level of training? How much did they actually care about the thing that you were in there for, the problem you were trying to solve?
Do they even use the stuff that they sell?
Right, precisely. And so what we do is we really put an emphasis both on our employees and our staff and the customer experience that we can provide. We want to have people that really use the gear that we sell or whether it's clothes, shoes, backpacks, whatever it is. But also we really try hard to give people an experience that increasingly you just don't find in retail stores anymore. I tell the staff often, hey, I want you guys to try to actually remember customer names because it's important. When was the last time you walked in a store and someone called you by your name?
Yeah. It's the sweetest sound that you can hear.
It is. It really is. And obviously we're not, as much as we'd love to, we're not going to remember every customer's name. But it's all about building that relationship, remembering something about them so that, again, we can be a resource for those people. And so when folks come in, I want people to know that, we're in it for the long run. I want people to feel like they're treated fairly and honestly, and that sometimes that means talking you out of something. Sometimes that means instead of, trying to make the sale today, that we're just being honest with people that maybe you already own something that you can use to solve your problem, but through that experience, gaining them as a long-term customer so that when they need something in the future, they're going to remember, hey, I went into Pack Rat. I was treated respectfully. I was treated well. And when I need something, I'm going to go give them a shot.
So floating the buffalo, hunting, mountain climbing, hiking at Devil's Den, all of those activities, there would be something for an individual at Pack Rat.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we were founded, when Scott and Carolyn started the business, they were literally selling canoes out of their garage.
Wow.
And so our heritage is very much in paddling, and they were avid backpackers. So hiking and paddling were the kind of the two core things, and that will never go away. That's our bread and butter for sure. But then quickly we started carrying rock climbing equipment, and then as my responsibilities increased, we now even have a small traditional archery section in the store. And that's one of the beautiful things I think about working for a small local business is that the staff can help craft that business into their own interests, which brings value to their work and also introduce new opportunities to people in the community. And I think that's one of the key components of why I've been there so long.
I love it. And I mean, the thing I like about like an outdoor space is that people are coming there to get out into nature and really experience it to the best of their ability. And sometimes you do need certain tools, you do need certain equipment to be able to do that effectively.
Yep. Definitely. And safely. I mean, that's the thing at the end of the day. I love the saying, the more you know, the less you need.
Yeah.
And so there's certain amounts of things that you need in order to be safe. But as your skill level increases, you can be more minimalistic and perhaps leave things behind that, as you become a more competent outdoors person, you don't need as many things. But at the end of the day, most of us are out there to recreate, enjoy ourselves, have this connection with nature. And good and well-made gear allows us to do that. An example would be if I need to treat wild water to make it safe to drink, because most of us know, hopefully, that we can't just drink out of streams these days, which is unfortunate. I can boil water to do that. But if I'm out on a hiking trip, do I want to stop, get a stove out, get a pot, scoop water, boil it, wait for it to cool down before I could drink it? Or do I want to just carry a high-quality water filter with me or a water purification tool?
Do those work?
Oh, they absolutely work.
Really?
Now, they're certainly not all created equal. And when it comes to their technology, they vary a lot in terms of what they are able to treat and not. I mean, that's another perfect example of the type of information that we want to share with people at PackRat. So it's like, hey, I want to go on a hiking trip or I want to start hiking and I know that I need to be able to manage my water needs. We all know hydration is really important, but you're not sure where to start. There's 100 different devices out there in the market. That is precisely why PackRat exists. So you can walk in, you can talk to someone who's actually used the product before. We can ask you questions about the kind of things that you're interested in and how you're going to use it. And then we can give you options and make recommendations. And then you, at that point, hopefully, are making your decision more educated so that you can not spend more money than you really have to, but you can get something that's adequately going to take care of your needs.
Yeah, no, I've seen I'm an avid YouTube watcher and I've seen some videos of people taking some pretty suspect and cloudy water and transforming it with these filters.
Yeah, my favorite, I'll go ahead and mention this, and with full transparency, I'm an ambassador for this company. So just know that ahead of time. But my favorite product on the market for treating wild water is called the Grail. That's one of my favorite brands. We've been working for this company for a while. They're out of the Pacific Northwest. But their unit works like a coffee press.
Yeah.
It's two parts. You pull it apart, you scoop the outer shell, and then you press it just like you would coffee. And as soon as you press it, the water is safe to drink. And it's actually a purifier. So it's going to remove viruses. And it also has a carbon element, so it gets rid of things like heavy metals and pesticide runoff. And honestly, for solo travel or even small groups, it's a really great product that everybody can find a use for.
Yeah, we'll have to put a link to that in the show notes for anybody interesting. I'm sure somebody's like, yeah, I want to check that out.
Yeah, super solid piece of gear.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So listen, I want to back up a little bit because you said a couple of things, and I'd love to maybe go a little bit more in depth about who introduced you to the outdoors?
If we go back to the beginning, it would definitely be my father. My father was kind of one of these very traditional Arkansas guys. He hunted and fished. And my grandpa was a very avid fisherman, and he was also a craftsman. He used to do things like carve wooden fish. And so fishing has been, in fact, my great-grandmother was a very avid fisherman too. My grandpa used to tell me stories about her being on the bayou down there in East Arkansas off the Mississippi River and fishing down there. And, so I definitely have that as a heritage. And to this day, getting on a river with a spinning reel and going smallmouth fishing, I'm not sure if it honestly gets a whole lot better in life than that for me. Or going on a backpacking trip in the mountains and carrying a fly rod and doing some backcountry fishing. I absolutely love that. But growing up, I went hunting and fishing with my dad. But when I moved to Northwest Arkansas, I was introduced to an outdoor club called an Explorer Post. Mm-hmm. And these Explorer Posts is kind of an off branch of the Boy Scouts. And I, unfortunately, was never fully able to get into Boy Scouts because when I was young, I moved around a lot. And so it was difficult for me to really find a group or a troop that I could invest time in. But when I was in junior high, there were a couple of guys and they said, hey, we're going to start this Explorer Post. And there were some dads and some mentors. And that really did change my life in a lot of ways because we were going hiking and rappelling. And then we did these campouts and went backpacking. And that was for me, a very moldable age. I was 13, 14 years old. And it was really eye-opening. And these things that I had always just kind of heard about or seen in magazines, all of a sudden I had a resource and a way to just start experiencing them. And I really never looked back. I mean, I knew somehow before I ever even climbed a mountain that I wanted to climb mountains and make that part of my life.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how some of us, even before we do something, we just feel it, right? And it's there. And you don't necessarily always know where that comes from. It's just innate. And I think ultimately for me, it's the whole sense of adventure component. I love nature. I love being outside. And it's hard to find a more adventurous thing than, going and climbing a big mountain, right?
Yeah,
and so I think at the end of the day, that's what it was all about.
So do you have kids, Rick?
I do.
Okay. So how have you introduced them to the great outdoors?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm asking is because we live in such a technological age.
Absolutely.
And sometimes there's something to be said for just unplugging and getting out into the great outdoors. And I'd be curious to see how you reconcile that as you even raise your kids in that space.
It's so important. And I have this conversation all the time with people. I mean, the good news when it comes to this is there is a lot of awareness in society in certain areas. And it is so important that kids have opportunities to go outside and interact with nature. And I believe really strongly that kids need opportunities to figure some of their own things out, and they should be able to push the edge of danger a little bit. I mean, think about it. If you're like, I'm 45, and I think back to when I was 10, my mother wouldn't see me. I would disappear into the neighborhood woods, and I wouldn't come home until dark. Yeah. And that would happen most days after school. And it's pretty surprising these days if you come across a parent that would allow a 10 to 12-year-old child to do that. I mean, it's almost non-existent anymore, right?
It really is because, and it's so funny. There's a meme out there, and I'm a couple years – I got you by a few years, but I'm a Gen X kid, latchkey kid, if you will. And so, there was a meme out that I've seen on Facebook of like these kids, and it looks like it's like the early 80s. Right. So think like Bad News Bears or something like that. And they're all on their bikes with the sissy bars and everything. And so, I remember those. I had a bike with a sissy bar, and I would legitimately on a Saturday morning get on a bike and I would ride and ride and ride.
All day.
And the post says, I don't think our parents realized how far we would ride in a day. I would literally ride 8, 9, 10 miles. I'd be in other towns.
Yeah.
I rode my bike across the George Washington Bridge one time. I mean, I did stuff where nowadays you would look at it, parents are just so protective of their kids.
Right. And it is sad because back then, I mean, that bike was freedom, right? Yeah. And that was how you explored and you experienced new things and you built your own little community with your friends, right? And you learned to rely on one another. And it wasn't that the world wasn't without danger, but it was a different time for sure. Yeah. The problem now is that we all know that there are a lot of risks, but the problem is kids don't learn the skills they need to manage those risks because they're protected all the time. And too much safety can lead to more danger.
Yeah.
That's the issue. And so one of the things that's always been really important to me, I mean, fortunately, I've been very blessed that my kids don't remember a time when they weren't camping. When they were 2 and 3, they were on a raft in the Buffalo River learning how to fish. Yeah. We started taking them on Western road trips when they were, I've got pictures of my daughter when she was, 4 with marshmallows all sticky all over her hands and her mouth around a campfire in Colorado, stuff like that. And those are my favorite memories. I wouldn't trade that for anything. But as they get older, I do challenge them. And I think it's important. Look, we have to allow our kids to fail, to be able to try hard things and get frustrated, but then be there for them to let them know, hey, you're not going to get it all right on the first time, right? And I went through this too. And, be there to challenge them, but also there to, to back them up and say, hey, it's okay. We're going to pick ourselves up and we're going to have another go at it. Yeah. And that is the screens can't do that.
No.
What the problem with the screens, and don't get me going because I can go down a hole on this, but they're constantly being compared to everyone else who they feel like who the screens are telling them they're not enough. They should compare themselves to these other people that have more money and more resources and all these things. And it really is sad. And it's a big problem that I think all of us recognize. And I don't have all the answers by any means, but I think it's always better to do something than nothing.
Well, yeah. And I guess my point with all, and even going down this rabbit hole, if you will, is just the fact that a lot of times I think as parents, I have 3 boys and my wife and I have these conversations all the time about, man, sometimes we feel helpless and we are unfortunately a slave to this technology that's around us and it inundates us. But my thought is simply that, man, I'm trying to take more advantage of what I have right in my backyard. And what I mean by that is simply, we live in Northwest Arkansas.
Right.
It's a great place to live, but it's also, you're at the foot of so many beautiful venues and places that you can go to get out that are actually free, that you can really experience the great outdoors. And so if nothing else, I think that there really are opportunities for parents, especially, to kind of help their kids disconnect and reconnect with themselves.
100%. I mean, we are very blessed in the area that we live in to have all these natural places, whether it's state parks or just national forest. I mean, we have thousands of acres of national forest in our area. And I realize that for some folks, it can be intimidating to know where to start, right? If you don't have a background, if you didn't grow up hiking and camping and things like that, it's like, well, I know this is good. And there's a lot of, growth that can come from taking my family out to these, but it can be a little scary, right?
Yeah,
Knowing where to go. But what's interesting is when I start having conversations like this with people, often the things that they're worried about, the bears and the snakes and things are really not the things that they really should be focused on.
Right.
And, again, that's one of the other things that, we at PackRat can help do is get people pointed into the right direction and help them to figure out where the resources are that they can find out about these things, whether it's, local guidebooks. But there's something about like word of mouth that no matter what internet site you're on or what guidebook you're reading or what Instagram page you're on, those things have their value for sure. But the human component of actually talking with someone one-on-one who's been somewhere, it can be, I hope anyway, inspiring and really motivating, right?
Yeah.
To get out and to go see these things for yourself. Because, I mean, you can see any national park you want just by typing it into Google, right? But it's never going to be the same as being there yourself.
Exactly.
And I think all of us need to have these, real in-person experiences. And if we can share them with our friends and family, I mean, that's even better. And, there's so much healing and good things that can and growth that can come from outdoor experiences. And it's not always going to, a lot of times when the healing happens, it's not on the beautiful sunny day with the birds out and walking through the meadow. It's going to be those times when it's pouring down rain and you're cold and, you start having these thoughts about, oh man, why did I do this? I'd rather not be here. Well, that's one way to think about it. But of course, the other way to think about it is to be like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm going to embrace this and I'm going to learn something from this experience. And hopefully, oftentimes, that's going to be where the real growth comes from.
Yeah, and it's so funny. And this particular thought with this is that right before the pandemic happened, we had made a plan to go do the Grand Canyon and to do some camping. Yep. And of course, the pandemic kind of stifled some of that.
Sure.
And we still want to get back to that. And my wife and I were saying, well, the boys aren't getting any younger.
Yep.
So, it's one of those things where you just sometimes have to just grab the bull by the horns and do it.
I firmly believe that. You can always find reasons why a particular thing is not the right time.
Sure.
I mean, everybody I know these days is busy.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to talk, well, it's not a good time to do this or that. Do it. That's the best advice I can give people is like you'll wish your life away.
Yep, absolutely.
You've got to you have to make the time for your priorities. And I can't think of, quite frankly, a better priority than going outside and being in nature with your friends and your family.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the outside and being with friends and family, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on was to talk about the experience and the genesis of this Winterlager program that you do, that you get outdoors and you get together with a couple of individuals and it's a couple of days. But why don't you just kind of share this program?
I'd love to. So, it's always hard to know where the beginning point is when I start talking about these things. But a couple other things about me. I've been an outdoor educator for about 20 years, and I'm also on a staff at Boulder Outdoor Survival School in southern Utah. So I have a background in teaching survival skills, and I'm also a wilderness first responder. So I have medical training and things like that because over the years, I've found myself in a leadership position running various types of trips, or at least assisting with various types of trips. And so I knew for a long time that I wanted to do kind of a multi-day experience through PackRat, where we provided people with the opportunity to go out and truly get hands dirty and really challenge themselves, but do it in a way that met everybody where they were at. Mm-hmm. Because, if you invite a group of people, obviously experience levels are going to vary. But I am always I'm not interested in doing things that have already been done.
Yeah.
And just rinse and repeat. And so if I'm going to take it upon myself to create a new event, I'm always going to try to do something that has either not been done or bring extra value to it. And my wife and I were actually on a trip in Sweden, and we were backpacking over there. And I had been thinking about this for a while. And the idea finally, I put all the pieces together on that trip. And the word Winterlager in Swedish means winter camp. And so I had met Matt Cooper at an event for Appleseed's Farm here in Fayetteville. And Appleseed's does really great work, and they have special events that they do to raise money for the garden that they have and the school programs that they put on. And we were doing I do several of these, one every winter now for Appleseeds, but it's called a wild table event. And I actually work with Arkansas Game and Fish to get a deer donated, and we do wild venison. And Matt was one of the chefs at one of those events. Well, he cooked the best deer I'd ever had in my life. And I was like, I got to go talk to this guy. This was amazing. And so that's how I met Matt. And shortly after that, when I had this idea, I thought of him immediately. And I was like, I wonder, I had never seen anyone do a survival skills event, especially a multi-day one, and then do amazing food. Most of the time you're out there half starving to death, right? You're eating terrible food and that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, what if we do both? What if we put together these really, the true survival skills, or at least for me, nature connection skills that all of us have the ability to develop. But then on top of that, we do primitive food, but we do it gourmet style. Mm-hmm. And Matt, thank goodness, he was like, I love it. Let's do it. And he's been a partner in that event for 3 years now.
Wow.
And so basically, you go to PackRat's website, you sign up for this event. We do it every January. And so it focuses around winter-specific skills for shelter, water, and fire in the backcountry. And then from there, your breakfasts and your dinners are going to be phenomenal. I mean, the guy pulls out surprises every year, and he just always blows everyone away. So jokingly, although not all that jokingly, I'm like, well, I'm there to help you guys learn something, but really everyone's here to eat Matt's food, which is hilarious. But at the same time, he's just so skilled at what he does. And so it's been a really fun thing to see. I have one guy, this guy, John, who has come every year. And to me, that's always the best signal I have that, okay, I'm doing something right. If you get repeat people, right, that come back every year and they want to be part of it, that there's really no bigger honor for me than to have people that want to come back and be part of things that you're doing over and over again, because they're finding value in it for their own life. And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to create. If I'm going to put on an event, to me, it's not worth it if it's not creating value for people. Otherwise, you're just going through the motions, right? And so it's been a ton of fun to get to do things like that.
And then Matt told me about the program that you do out in Utah, and it's a survivalist program. Is that correct?
It is. So it's the oldest wilderness skills school in the country. And it was started in the 60s in southern Utah. It's called Boulder Outdoor Survival School, and it's in Boulder, Utah. And usually when people ask, I say it's in Boulder, and they immediately think of Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah.
This is a tiny, tiny town in the middle of nowhere. There's cowboys and hippies and stuff in this tiny little town. But it is on the borders of the Escalante National Monument, sandwiched in between an alpine environment up on Boulder Mountain and Red Rock Desert. And it's truly an amazing place. And the organization is permitted to run these immersive wilderness experiences in this incredible landscape that lasts anywhere from 1 week to a month out on the land. And so there are a variety of different types of programs based on your experience level, but the bread and butter programs are called the field courses, and probably the 2-week one is the most popular. But how that would work is you would leave the school or the van where you get dropped off with a knife and a water bottle and maybe a piece of fabric and your clothing layers and not much else. And you head out into the wilderness with a crew from the school. You have a head instructor, a regular instructor, and often an apprentice. And those people are the ones looking after you while you're out there. And it's been a pleasure to help assist with those programs over the years. I don't get to do it nearly as often as I would like, but I do I do what I can to support the school and their efforts, because it's just amazing what they do. There's a lot of schools now that are good schools that teach these skills, but there are very few that take people into truly remote and wild wilderness to do these types of things. It's not like on a piece of property just outside of town, right?
Yeah.
And there's some amazing opportunities there.
So I didn't hear you say anything about a backpack or a tent.
No.
Or wait a minute.
No.
And I might add that, like, I'm assuming that maybe people that are trackers would utilize, or because, like, I think of that movie Hunter, I think, with Tommy Lee Davis. The Hunted, yeah, which was really good. I've actually watched that movie several times.
Me too.
It's a very good movie to watch, but the challenge was that the FBI brought this guy in who was Tommy Lee Davis, and he was a tracker, and he actually trained kind of like a special forces group of people, and Benicio del Toro was in it, and it's just really good. And it just talked about how, you're very mindful about your surroundings.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because a lot of the skills featured in that movie are precisely the types of things
I figured as much.
They are. And it's depending upon the course level that you're in. Some of the courses you will gain gear as time goes on. So you have to, we kind of break you down to build you back up. And so you're going to go out there and you're going to see what it's like to operate with next to nothing. And then as time goes on, you'll start getting some food and some other supplies. And then all of a sudden, life seems really good, because, you've got a blanket now. Maybe you've got a poncho, and you can start to use your creativity and skills you've learned to craft the things that you need. But they offer, my student course that I did there is called the Hunter-Gatherer. And you have almost nothing when you head out, and you're out there for 2 weeks, really living from the land. And it's a remarkable experience to go through something.
So you're either going to lose weight or you're going to learn how to hunt and do everything around that. So
I've done quite a lot of those types of things. Some folks know this, but another thing that I did. Some people are probably familiar with the TV show Alone that has become popular.
It's a very good show.
So there's the main series Alone, and then there are some offshoots of the same series, and one of them they did recently was called Alone Frozen, but there was another one that they did called Alone the Beast, and I was on one of those episodes. And so in that particular, and these are available, they're on the History Channel, but I think you can go on Amazon and find it. But essentially, the one that I did, we were dropped off in a swamp in Louisiana in a remote location, and they didn't give us any tools at all. And when I say none, I mean none. And we had to see if we could make it for a month with no tools. And the one thing I'll tell you on our particular episode, other than our clothes, like we were wearing clothes, but the only thing they gave us was an alligator that had been killed that morning. And this was an alligator that came from a farm. It wasn't a wild alligator. But each episode of that particular show, it starts off with a few people And the only resource they have is this animal that they have to then, you don't have a knife. You got to figure out how to process this thing somehow. And even though I did it for, the purposes of the TV show, it was really an eye-opening, incredible experience, very difficult. But I gained a lot of insight through doing things like that and the boss course and a lot of my own trips that I enjoy sharing with other people that maybe are not intentionally ever going to subject themselves to those types of things. But that's one of the reasons I feel like I'm in a position to lead these types of classes and experiences, because I do have firsthand experience of what it's really like to be out there and have next to nothing, and how limiting that can be, and what's realistic and what isn't.
Yeah.
And of course, that's different for everybody. But I really love introducing people to these skills.
Yeah. So, and you have actually several events. Not that you're not busy enough, right, with everything else that you have going on,
right.
But the Brewha Bushwhack.
Yeah. So that is kind of it's my biggest event that I put on. I started this 11 years ago, and we've only missed 1 year because of 2020 when it was COVID was just started kicking off. But this will be number 10 that we're coming up on. And it takes me a while just to explain what it is that we do out there. But the easiest way to think about it is it's a wilderness skills adventure challenge. And so people compete as groups or teams of 3 or 4 people. And one of the slogans that we have for the event is that you race for points, not time, and you can come in last and win. And the way that you do that is teams are out there working together, and they're using a map and a compass, old school orienteering, and they're doing nature ID. So they're identifying plants and trees and animal tracks, and they're shooting a traditional bow and arrow on a 3D course, and they're paddling a canoe, and they're making fire, and they're doing first aid challenges, and all these outdoor, for lack of a better term, kind of woodsy knowledge, woodsmanship skills. And they accrue points over the course of the day based on the level of skill that they can achieve. And at the end of the day, whoever has the most points wins. And it is a ton of fun. And again, one of the things that I'm most proud of personally is that I have these teams that come back year after year. And I do training leading up to this event. I'll put on classes for fire building and survival skills and archery and all these things. And it's been a privilege to watch these teams come in and maybe be like not super outdoor oriented, or maybe they just like did some basic camping and then turn into really capable, skilled outdoors people. It makes me really proud to have created something that has, been able to encourage people and inspire them to increase their skill level. And then so simultaneously, while it's going on, we have a big outdoor festival. So I invite a lot of the vendors that we have at Pack Rat and a lot of my personal friends that come and do skill demos of various kinds and other nonprofit groups. And it's just a big kind of homage to outdoor culture in general, blending kind of the old with the new. And then we have a lot of local breweries. Fossil Cove has been a partner of ours since the beginning. Quite frankly, if it wasn't for Ben Mills at Fossil Cove, the event might not even exist. So I always tip my hat to Ben and Andrew. And then, of course, other breweries, Crisis Brewing Company, my good buddy Sean Slape. We've had a lot of amazing support over the years through other local businesses to be able to do this. And again, it's just all about adding value, creating culture, doing things in the community to give people reasons to, again, step away from the computer and go out in the woods and do human stuff with other humans.
Yeah. So what time of year does this happen?
April. Yeah. So it's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is really great timing for that. April 5th for 2025 is when the event is going to be. You can learn more about that either on the Pack Rat website, or you can go to brewhabushwhack.com.
Yeah, we'll put all those links in the show notes. What is Pack Rat's website?
PackRatOC.com for Outdoor Center.
Okay, yep. Perfect. Yeah, we'll put all of that on the show notes so people know and they can check it out and definitely participate in some of these events. And if nothing else, just reach out to Rick and learn more about how you can put your phone down and get up off that couch and get on outside. Because, I mean, the thing that I'm always amazed at is just how beautiful this area is.
It's amazing. We have so many great opportunities, and, like I say, there's so many distractions, right, going on. We're all busy, whether it's professional life or your kids are in sports, and there's just all these things going on. But you really, in my opinion, there's few things you could choose to do for your health beyond nutrition and exercise that are going to be as good for you as just getting outside and developing that connection and awareness that we just, quite frankly, don't have in our lives as much as we could all benefit from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you've said a mouthful, and I would certainly encourage people that are listening to this that are either new to Northwest Arkansas or you've been here for a minute, but you really just haven't taken advantage of all the natural beauty that's around us. I mean, we've done several episodes on the White River, the Buffalo River, Hobbs State Park. I mean, there's a little bit of everything right here in your backyard. Yep. So I really want to encourage people to take advantage of the beauty that you see around you. We talk about it so much, but you also, I think, given everything that's going on in this world, sometimes it's good just to disconnect and, get out among nature. And, you 100%. do a lot of stuff with the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust. We had Marson Nance on not too long ago. I mean, they're doing really great work. And
they are.
I mean, it's important to be supporting organizations like that are preserving the land that is around us.
Yep, absolutely. As Northwest Arkansas grows, the work that Northwest Arkansas Land Trust becomes more and more important. I don't think anyone's moving to Northwest Arkansas because they want to see more strip malls go up, right?
No,
I mean, we need those things for some part of our life, right? I mean, and certainly local businesses need areas that they can have space. But once green space is gone, it's so much harder to get it back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And certainly we are blessed to have a lot of public land, either state-owned land through national parks or through the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission or through our national forest lands that we have available. And I think a lot of people just forget how fortunate we are that we have these public spaces that belong to all of us.
Yeah.
Regardless of your background, fortunately, as an American citizen, it's a birthright. And another thing I'll raise awareness of, I'm also part of the Arkansas chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I'm an avid traditional archer and bow hunter, and I believe in hunting through a respectful, ethical manner. And through that organization, we pay a lot of attention about maintaining access to our public places. And not only for hunters and anglers, but for everybody to get to recreate on, cycling, trail running, backpacking, paddling, all these things. We have a responsibility to one another to work together to keep these wild places for us to be able to go recreate on. And as volatile as our political environment is these days, you have a lot of states out there right now. Utah's kind of heading the movement on this, but also Wyoming and Idaho and a lot of other states are trying to suggest that we need to take this BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, and National Forest land away from the federal government so that they can manage it themselves. I completely disagree with that. And the reason is because when you pull away these federal agencies and you allow states to take it over, there's a much higher probability that these lands are going to be sold off. And I hate to say it, but the wealthy folks are going to find ways to utilize them
Absolutely.
And become more wealthy. And the rest of us lose public places for us to go recreate on, and we lose wildlife habitat. And those things, we can't make more of it right now, not very easily. And it's so critical. So one of the things that I would implore everyone to do if you have a minute is to educate yourself on that movement. And there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. But at the end of the day, sending an email, making a phone call to one of our representatives to say, hey, I don't support this. We need to keep public lands in public hands so that we all have and can maintain this right we have to go out and experience nature as a citizen of this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, there's some states that for the longest time, you figured, oh, well, they just have so much land, it won't be a problem. But states like Montana and others are experiencing some of the challenges of that.
It's really bad. I mean, there's a whole controversy in Montana. There's this mountain range called the Crazy Mountains, and I've been there, and it's surrounded by private ranch land, and they've completely tried to close off access and basically have a private mountain range.
Yeah.
And it's really sad when you have these interests that have all this money that keep the rest of the public out.
It's the same principle of private beaches on the coast.
Yep.
Same idea. You know, it's like, man, why is it that private? I mean, the ocean isn't private. Right. So, you know, it's like, come on. So
But of course, they can charge money to other people to go in there, and then they have this, private experience. And I'm not saying I'm against, certainly I'm a landowner. I mean, there has to be a balance there. But what I do believe is critical is that obviously we have a rocky history in this country of making a lot of bad mistakes and not doing justice to many communities. But I firmly believe that one of the things that we got right was the way our public lands are collectively part of everyone's birthright here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having these, because if you go to Europe, if you go to a lot of other places, there are trails and things that you can do, but they don't have near the opportunities and the space that we have.
Right.
And it truly is amazing. And I think it's something that a lot of us take for granted.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you taking time to kind of share your experience, a little bit of your background, what you've done at Pack Rat, and just some things that I had no idea about. And just hearing about an 80-year-old named Carolyn who's out there doing her thing on a regular basis. Shout out to you, Carolyn.
Yep.
You are my new shiro because I love hearing stories like that of people that have just never allowed much grass to grow under their feet and are out there doing the thing every day. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I really want to call attention to the Brewha Bushwhack, the event that happens every April that Rick is part of, and then the Winterlager, which I'm going to try to get out there. If Matt's going to be there, I want to be there next year. So I'm definitely going to try to get out there and be a part of that. And I'll try to share some of the pictures that I saw that were posted on Instagram when we do the show notes. So I think people will appreciate that. And man, thank you so much for all that you do to create more awareness about this beautiful natural outdoor that we have around us. And then just for all that you do in the survival skills space. I think we all need to bone up on our survival skills. So
I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Rick Spicer, thank you so much. And we really appreciate it. There you have it, folks. Another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. We hope you enjoyed this. Remember, our episodes come out every Monday, rain or shine. You can catch us on every major podcasting platform. Especially, we would appreciate it if you would check us out on Apple Podcasts and rate and review the podcast. Let us know what you think. And who knows, we might even read the review online. That's all that we have for you this week. We will see you back here next week with another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.